Well, good morning. Good morning. How are we doing? I'm gonna be real today. We've been going through this series called Asking for a Friend, and today we're looking at what does it cost. And with a welcome like that, I feel like I have to live up to what you guys are asking. So it's so good to meet you. We've never met before, my name is Matt. I get to serve as the campus pastor, and like I said, we've been looking at this idea of asking for a friend. And a lot of us ask these kind of questions, right? Hey, Doc, I have a friend and he has a growth in a certain place. What does it cost to get that removed? Or maybe you are a young driver and it's like, hey, what's this going to cost? No, I'm just asking for a friend, Mom and Dad. It wasn't me, I promise, right? Or maybe you've made some creative adjustments on your taxes and you're just asking for a friend, what kind of time you might have to do. There's all kinds of questions that we ask for a friend. And like I said, we've been going through this series, and today we're asking for a friend. What does it cost? What does it cost? What does it cost? And we ask these things for a lot of different things. What does it cost to drive? Was one of my favorite questions that I asked when I was 16. Now, if you've been around here for a while, you've heard that I have a twin sister. And we were so excited about getting our licenses. I'm going to be real. In this generation today, like a lot of kids, when they turn 16, they're like, no, I'm good. I don't understand you. Okay, like I got some love, right? I mean, I set my alarm for 5 a.m. and I didn't need it to wake up. It was the one time in my entire existence that I ever remember not having to wait on my twin sister, okay? Like we were both ready. We're like, let's do this. We can't wait. We're going to go get our license. It's going to be amazing. And if you might have heard me talk about this before, but I feel like my second calling in life was to be a race car driver. Some of you know this because you know what kind of car I drive and you've seen me around town. I'm sorry. Okay? But like I love driving, and I love driving fast, and I've driven commercial vehicles. I drove truck and trailer for a long time when I was a young adult. I learned to back up at like 30 miles an hour with a trailer. No kidding. Like, I love driving. It's fun. It's not so fun for whoever's riding with me usually, but it's fun for me. My wife's like, I'll just take somebody else's car. But there's a cost to everything. And when I was about 17, I almost paid a significant cost. See, I was driving my cousin home from school, and as we were headed home to her house, there's a corner. And they were doing some construction right there, and they had kind of wrapped up and done their thing, but they had left some loose gravel on the road. And for me, like that's an invitation to have some fun. And so I would go over to pick her up for school or something else, different things. And I'd go around that corner and I'd give it a little extra, and I'd just kind of let the tail slide out of my little GMC Sonoma, and I'd kind of drift around that corner. Tokyo Drift wasn't out yet. It was me. I created it all. And it was so much fun, and we're driving back to her house, and I looked over, and I'm like, watch this. And I kicked it down into second gear. I drive a manual. Some of you don't know what that is, okay? But you change gears as you're driving. I kicked it down into second gear, and I just gave it a little too much gas. And in that moment, I became terrified. Because as I looked up, the lady that lived in the house on that corner was standing on the curb. And she was terrified and frozen in fear, and I was terrified because I couldn't do anything. And my truck began sliding towards her, and I just had a moment of, oh, dear Lord, what is this going to cost? Thankfully, by the grace of God, my truck came to a stop, and She looked at me and I looked at her, and I did what any self-respecting 17-year-old young man would do. I drove as fast as I could, right? Like I was like, get me out of here. And as I took off, there was a cross street, and you know, of course, the way it's going to happen, there was a cop right there. And he had his window down, and he's looking around to see what just happened, and I just kept going. Because I was terrified. I knew that the cost that I had almost paid was significant, and I knew that going away was not the right move, but I didn't know what else to do. So I drove about 3 or 4 blocks away, and I pulled into a business, and I just stopped, and I just put my head on the steering wheel, and my cousin was like, "Are you okay?" And then I heard another voice. It was the cop who pulled behind me and got on the intercom. "Driver, turn your vehicle off and step outside of the vehicle with your hands up." Now, I don't know how many of you have been pulled out at gunpoint. It's happened to me twice. I'll tell the other story some other time. It is not fun. And I got out of the car, and he said, "Do you know that you almost killed that lady?" It's like, "Yeah, I do. I'm sorry." It terrified me. He said, "You're going to follow me." I'm from Texas. This is what we used to do back in the day. "You're going to follow me," I don't know if they do it anymore, "to this lady's house, and you're going to apologize to her." Absolutely. "Don't you dare try to outrun me." Don't worry, I have a 4-cylinder. You have like a VL100. It doesn't work that way. I know this, right? I followed back to the lady's house. I apologized. I was embarrassed. And I just thought about man, if I had counted the cost before I went around that corner, I never would have done that. And I hope you've never found yourself in that position, but a lot of us have found ourselves in a place where we've made a decision and we've done something and we haven't counted the cost. And maybe it was a big thing and you had to pay a big consequence, or maybe it was a big thing, but like me, you just got lucky and it didn't turn out the way it could have. Or maybe it was big, it was severe, and you're still having to pay for the consequences of your action. The truth is, there's consequences to all of our actions. Everything costs something, right? Like we hear this all the time. It's like you can't get anything for free. There's a cost to everything. Big decisions, little decisions, decisions that we think about, decisions that we don't even give a second thought. If you're not stressed out enough over the story that I just told, I just want to increase your anxiety this morning. You're welcome. Did you know that a person was killed attending a hockey game when a puck struck them in the head 15 rows away? You ever think about that? I'm going to a hockey game, I might die. No, you don't think about that, right? A 49-year-old woman went to Taco Bell, and the wind blew over the Taco Bell sign, and it landed on her, killing her instantly. Some of you go to Taco Bell way too often to test, your ratios of living or dying on that. And it's Taco Bell. Okay, let's be real. Did you know that talking while charging your cell phone, the phone can actually explode in your ear? You ever grabbed a charger and it's like red hot? Just keep spinning that chamber. According to a global study conducted in 2018, the animal that you are most likely to die from is a shark. No. Is a deer. No. It's a mosquito. A mosquito. Good thing we live in California and there's not a lot of mosquitoes. I was just in Virginia. It's crazy. This is my favorite one. Controlling a sneeze can literally rupture a blood vessel in your head and kill you. Thank you. I have finally been justified for sneezing loudly. Who's with me? Anybody just let it fly? I'm like, I am not going to kill myself over a sneeze, okay? You're going to have to experience it. My family's like, stop. I'm like, I don't want to die. It's keeping me around longer. And they're like, hold it. I'm like, okay. But there's a cost to everything, even seemingly simple things. And that's a question that a lot of people ask as they come to church. When they hear about God or they hear about Jesus and do I want to believe this thing or do I not, what does it cost? What's the ask? Most of the motivation around this comes down to an idea of like, am I willing to pay the cost, right? Can I do it? Am I going to be good enough? Am I going to be worthy? Am I going to be able to sacrifice whatever I have to sacrifice? Like, what does it cost? What are the actual requirements for being a Jesus follower? Well, let's talk about it. Because see, some of us have never believed. We're in this room today and you're like, hey, it's the last 3 years. I figure I'll give everything a little shot, okay? What's it cost? I've heard stuff maybe on social media, or I've seen stuff in the news, or my friends have passed around stories, and I've just never believed because I'm not sure if I want to associate with people like that. The good news is I'm not sure for a lot of those stories if I would want to associate with them either. So I hope that helps. Some of you are like, man, I have never believed because I just don't know. I've never been to church. I've never heard about this Jesus character. Some of you are saying, man, I just have never believed because I've read some of the Bible and some of the requirements or some of the things that I read, it's tough. I don't know if I want to do that. Maybe you used to believe. Maybe you're saying, I have friends that treated people in a way that I just can't respect, and I used to believe, but I walked away. Or my teacher told me, I was at university, and here's what they said, and because we have not grown in our faith and understand the different conversations that are going on, we're like, man, I used to believe, but I walked away because if that professor said that, then it has to be true. If I saw that clip on, TikTok or Instagram or whatever the next latest and greatest is, like I stepped away from student ministry like 8 years ago, or I don't know how many years, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years ago now, and I was like, I instantly aged 30 years because I know nothing anymore. It's kind of freeing. I like it. But you're like, man, I saw that thing and it has to be true. It was on the internet, right? So I used to believe. Or maybe for you, you do believe. You're like, man, I believe in Jesus and I'm trying to follow Jesus. But when your unchurched friends ask you, what does it cost? You kind of freeze up. You're like, man, I'm not sure. I don't know how to answer that question. We've actually had people come to the church before and say, hey, like, what does a membership here cost? Just wondering, what are my monthly dues? And I love that question because it's an honest question. And I love the answer even more because for some of us, we're like, hey, I don't know how to answer that question. Like, is it memorizing stuff for the Bible? Is it tithing? And by the way, what does tithing really mean and how do you spell it? And I don't really understand all that. Is it being good enough? Is it knowing what the word ecumenical means? All of us, regardless of where we fall on the spectrum, are asking, what does it cost? And the thing I love about the Bible is it's full of people and it's full of stories of others just like us. They wrestled with it too. We're going to read in John today, and John struggled with worthiness. See, he was under the impression, and maybe you are too, that you had to earn your right to be a Christ follower. Maybe if I'm good enough, I can squeak in past the gates of heaven and be accepted. Maybe just asking for a friend, what's it cost? How do I get in? John was in that place, and he felt like he had to earn it. He was always the first to volunteer. He was eager to please Jesus. He did this a lot of times out of fear. And man, I love the story because I can raise my hand and think of times where I've done the same thing. So John writes down a lot of these stories, and in the book of John, it opens with Jesus' story that this love, this grace, what does it cost, is for everyone. In fact, that's why we have it on the wall back here. That this place is for everyone, that Jesus' love is for everyone, that we open up our doors and want to have a heart that goes into our community for everyone. So we read in John chapter 3, verse 16, one of the most famous verses in all of the Bible. It says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son." It didn't say for you worked hard enough. It didn't say because you were good enough. It didn't say because you checked off enough boxes. It says, "For God so loved the world. He gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life." Guys, this is good news. And so many times the world puts forth a message that this is not the truth, that this is not what we believe, that it's about checking off boxes. I love verse 17 that continues on. It says, "For God didn't send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world." See, God, since creation, has been on a rescue mission. And he paid the price for whoever believes. So what does it cost? You got to believe. You have to believe. You have to make the decision that I believe that Jesus is God's Son. And then guess what? The cost is paid. That forward, backward, everything left and right that we've ever done in our life, that the cost is paid. That I don't have to earn it. I don't have to be good enough. I don't have to memorize enough. I don't have to somehow achieve level gold or platinum status at Chick-fil-A. I'm accepted. I like Chick-fil-A, so I'm probably going to get there. But I'm accepted. And I think this is something that people that are far from Christ and people that are close to Christ sometimes struggle with. Because so many times we feel like we have to earn it. So many times we feel like we have to be good enough. But it says that it's for whoever believes. Now, here's what I want to point out. That believe is not passive. That it's not like, man, I came, I heard the words, and I believe, and I'll see you later because I'm going to go out and nothing's going to change about my life, and nothing I've ever done is going to be any different. I believe. Yeah, I believe. It's great. I believe in a thing called love. Sorry, just go back. I believe. No, it's an active I believe. It's I'm believing. I'm choosing every day to place my life, to place my trust, to place my hope in believing that Jesus is the Son of God and that he paid once and for all the price for me. And believing means that Jesus gets a seat at the table of my decision making. In fact, Jesus gets the head seat at the table of my decision making. Because I believe in him, I believe that he's God's Son, I'm going to live my life differently because I'm believing. And sometimes, for some of you, you might wrestle with this. For me, sometimes I wrestle with this because it's like, I believe, but I kind of want, right? And hey, by the way, just asking for a friend, if I do this one little thing, what's it going to cost? I believe. I make the decision. The disciples wrestled with this. Jesus is talking to his disciples, and he's talking about the cost of following him. Remember, believe is active. Believe means that we are living out our faith. Jesus has just predicted his death and his resurrection, and man, that causes all kinds of craziness because the Jewish people at the time thought the Messiah was going to come and they were going to take over the Roman government. We're going to take it over. We're going to have our rule. It's going to be awesome. And suddenly the Messiah is saying, they're going to crucify me, but I'll rise again. Peter declared that Jesus is a Messiah. So there's all of these big things going on, and there's another truth bomb that Jesus drops. It's found in Matthew 16, verses 24 through 25. He says, then Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Now, for us, a lot of times we read something like that and we're like, yeah, okay, we know how it turns out. It's all good. I'm good with the cross. But for the Jewish listeners, for the disciples that heard this, when he talked about you must deny yourself and take up your cross, they were filled with fear because they knew what kind of horrible death that entailed. They knew that it wasn't the nails going through your hands and feet that would kill you. They knew that it was the agonizing, slow torture, drowning on your own fluid in your lungs that usually eventually took you out. So for them, when they hear this, they're like, oh man, that costs a lot. There's a cost to this. The good news, though, is that it continues. It says, for whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will find it. We'll find abundant life. We'll find a life filled with peace. We'll find a life filled with hope. That we'll find the love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control that it talks about being filled with when we receive the Holy Spirit. That we can find the abundant life found in Him. And I'm going to be real, I think one of the greatest disservices that we as Christianity have done in the last 15 years is to say that following Jesus will just make your life better and you'll never struggle and you'll never have anything go wrong. It'll be like prancing through the lilies. No, it says in this life you will have trouble. But it continues and says, but take heart. I've overcome the world. So there's going to be good and there's going to be struggle. But if we follow Jesus, He gives us that hope and peace that passes understanding. So there's a cost. There's a cost to believe. There's a cost to actively believe, to say, God, despite my circumstances, despite my situation, despite the thing that I see, despite the thing that I'm scared of, despite the thing that I'm walking through right now, God, you are head of my life, your way over my way. I trust that you are Yahweh, the Messiah, the Savior, the friend of sinners. Thank you, God. So I bend my life according to your will. See, this is where we see that Jesus' gift, Jesus' grace is truly a gift. A gift we don't earn, a gift we can't earn. Grace is a gift and God is the giver. And it's truly by grace that we're forgiven. There's nothing that we can do to be good enough because that's not what Jesus is asking for. He says, I've paid the price. Maybe you've heard that around here, that kind of idea, that kind of spirit. That this is a place where it's okay not to be okay. You're welcome here. It's okay. It's okay if you're not okay. And I love that just over time that we've added to it that this is a place where it's okay not to be okay, but we desperately don't want you to stay that way. We want something better. We want you to have hope. We want you to have excitement about the future that God has given you. That this is a hospital for the hurting, not a resort for the righteous. So we have our doors wide open for everyone because the same grace that's given to them was first given to us. We've experienced it and we actively live out our faith by responding. We can and will do everything and anything short of sinning to remove any unnecessary barrier that keep people from finding and following Jesus. Maybe like me, you've spent a lot of your life trying to earn a spot I know I messed up here, but I did 3 good things here, and I think if we kind of average it out, I might just squeak by. The disciples wrestled with us. People throughout time have wrestled with us, trying to make yourself appear good enough to God and to others. It's tough. And like I said earlier, I've been saved by grace, but sometimes I act like I've been saved by grub. It's true. I've been saved by grace, but sometimes I act like I've been saved by grub. Now, some of you are like, I don't get it. My last name's Grubb, okay? It's a weird last name. It's the one I got, okay? Now, you don't need to put my last name in there. You need to put your last name. Because you have been saved by grace, but sometimes you act like you've been saved by fill in the blank. Whatever you've done today, good, bad, weigh the scales, and maybe I'll get it. But the admission has already been paid. The debt has already been taken care of. So here's my question, because I think this is the better question. I think this is the right question. I think this is a question that my life and our lives should be spent responding to, which is exactly that. How we react is a response of how much we revere the gift. Right? You know this. You know this. At the core of your being, you know this. How we react is how much we revere the gift. Like sometimes you get something and it's like, okay, that's great. And you throw it away before they're even out of the room. You're like, that was fantastic, right? Some of you get like the substitute. It's like not the Nike Airs, it's the Nicaragua Airs. And you're like, oh, thanks so much, Grandma. That was fantastic. You know you're never going to wear it. You throw it in the back of the closet. Tell the truth, shame the devil. My favorite, I was not a favorite in my family with my grandparents. Just how it was. I love them, God bless them, God rest their souls, but they liked my cousins better than they liked my sister and I. It's the truth. One year, okay, for Christmas, we get, my sister and I both get 2 gifts. My cousins got like 12 gifts. And so we're like, hey, cool, we know how it goes. And so we start opening our gifts. And I was 8 years old, by the way. 8 years old is important. I opened this gift, and it is a rubber stamp with my address on it. Thank you. I didn't laugh. I thought about crying because I wasn't exactly a prolific letter writer at 8 years old, and I didn't really figure that I would ever use it. But I was like, okay, it's Colonel and Granddad. I know how it goes. The second gift I open is a very cheap but digital watch. And I was like, you know what? Good for you, Grandma and Granddad. You tried. Until I looked at the box. And on the box of the watch, it literally says, free when you purchase rubber stamp. And at that moment, I was just like, this is a cheap gift. And I was 8, and so I didn't really totally get it. And I was bummed out because my cousin was playing with their Hot Wheels in their Hot Wheel house. And you give me one Hot Wheel, I would have been thrilled, okay? But in those moments, how we react is a response of how much we revere the gift. And I just think about, in our lives, reacting and responding to the gift of grace, how much do we trust that that gift is good? How do we live out a response to a thing like salvation that's free? See, this is what changed history when Jesus rose from the grave and says, your debt has been paid, the curtain has been torn in two. And when we don't share that love and we don't share that grace, it's kind of what has happened in the history of Christianity. People live it out for a while, and it's like, man, they are loving on people incredibly, and we see the fruit of how they're living, and they've been forgiven, and they're sharing it with other people. But sometimes we don't, and the church and God loses a little of its luster. See, if you're not a follower of Jesus, what I'm about to say, you don't have to do this. But if you are a follower of Jesus, when it comes to counting the cost, when it comes to the non-negotiables, this is what's required. It's found in John 13, verse 34, and this is the words of Jesus, and it says, "A new command I give you. Love one another as I have loved you. By this they will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another." See, our love for God, our response to his gifts, allow us to love others, to love the people that love us, to love people that don't love us, to love people that we really don't love. Because he led the way. Because he loved me in the midst of my sin. Because he, not passively, not past tense, but actively and present tense, loves me each and every day, loves you each and every day. In spite of sinning and falling short of the glory of God. And so he says, "This command I give you, love each other as I have loved you." Not as your neighbor has loved you, not as Matt has loved you guys, and it's kind of the gauge. No, loving each other as God has loved us. By this, they will know that they are my disciples. Jesus. Guys, I'm going to tell you, this is hard. This is hard. I mean, think about it. You got to love your enemies. You got to love the people that intentionally try to hurt you. You got to love the person at work that tries to cut your knees out from under you and get the promotion faster than you. You have to love the person that continually does wrong to you, that maligns your name, that puts you down, that makes you seem in a bad light. You are called as a believer of God to love them. Because we follow Jesus' example of how he loved us. And the crazy thing is, if you really live it out, if you really live out that kind of idea in your life, it becomes a blessing. And I just promise you, there have been people that have hurt me deeply in my life. And to be real and honest, I've been bitter about it. I've been hurt by it. I've been frustrated by it. I've held on to it. And one of the things that we've said around here for a long time is bitterness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. But it hurts us. When I instead respond to the gift of grace and the gift of God and freely give as he has given me, man, it changes my life for the better. It changes my life not because it's something that I'm good enough, but it's because Jesus led the way of being good enough. I had a friend in Oregon one time where we were talking about it's a free gift for those who believe. Our response is to love people deeply. And they said, "Matt, that's too simple. That's too easy. I need a list of requirements." It's I get it. I get it. It is too easy, except for the fact that it's really hard to love as we've been loved, to give as been given to us. I think about Andy Stanley. He painted this picture in one of his sermons recently, and I'm just going to ask you for a second just to close your eyes. Don't worry, nothing crazy is going to happen to you. I just want to read this thought from Andy Stanley. He said, can you imagine if the only annoyance people ever had about Christians was how kind they were? Can you imagine? How loving they were, how great of employees they were. What if all people could say about us was that they were crazy for believing that someone rose from the dead? Man, those Jesus followers are crazy for believing that. But wow, they really love people. You can open your eyes. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if we began to love that way? Here's what I'm going to do. I want you to imagine it. I want you to imagine being the kind of church that loves people radically, that shares grace freely, that gets abused intentionally because you're sharing the love of God. I'm not saying that you're hurt in your marriage or that you're intentionally walking into an abusive situation. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, what if we have the same kind of radical love that Jesus had for us when he said, despite their sins, despite all the things that they've done wrong, I'm going to give my life for them. And so we respond to the gift by living and showing grace. Here's what I'm going to tell you. It would change our town. It would change Thousand Oaks, Newberry Park, Northridge. People would be like, man, did you hear about those guys, man? They love people like crazy. Yeah, they believe that Jesus died and rose from the dead, and I'm not sure about that. But man, have you seen how they loved? It's crazy. People since history have been struggling with that. In Acts 15, it says, and so my judgment is that we should not make it difficult for those turning to God. Because the disciples back in the day were wrestling with this. They were struggling with it. Like, what do we do? Like, there's this whole circumcision thing, and they're not circumcised, and how are we going to navigate that? There's all these rules. I mean, like, we're Jewish, and we've grown up with this, and they have to do it right. And Paul is saying, like, no, we shouldn't make it hard for people turning to God. By grace, we've been forgiven, and by grace, we need to share that with our community. So here's what I'm going to ask you. Have you received the gift? And if you've received the gift, man, what a good gift it is. So thankful to be a pastor, that my job is sharing the gift that I've been given. One of my friends says it's because you only work one day a week. But man, my job, whether I worked here or not, would be to respond to that gift. Your job is to respond to that gift. Our job is to shine brightly in this world so that people may see our response to the gift and praise their Father in heaven. Guys, let's be a people who love extravagantly. Because I'm going to tell you, that's going deep. People talk about, I want to go deeper in my faith. I want to learn Hebrew and Greek and Aramaic. And I've learned some of that. And it's good. And I'm not saying it's bad. But the Bible's very clear that knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. You want to go deep? Love somebody that hates you. Whew. You want to go deep? Offer grace. And they just keep abusing you. Verbally, at work, whatever it might be. Keep showing them the love of the Father. You know that you can even forgive and show extravagant love to an abuser, not staying in the relationship, but by letting go of the bitterness that's holding you captive. So, man, I'm saved by grace. I'm gonna live free, and my hope and my prayer is that you would experience it too.